we're going to be taking in the waistband of some pants. A lot of menswear has a seam in the waistband at the center back also, in addition to the center seam here. However, many of the ready-made things like khakis and jeans don't have that. So they're basically not made to alter as easily as many of the menswear things. So first you have to take out the tag that's in the center here. I'm going to do that real quick. Just kind of gets in the way when you're trying to stitch. And you can put it back in later, or you can leave it out, whichever. Okay, I've already marked, when I pinned these pants on my son, this is what it looked like. I had pinned them like this. And so when I had them pinned, I then opened up my waistband here, and then I found where my pin was, and I just marked with my chalk where my pin is. And then you can take out the pin, and then that tells you how far apart you're actually working. So that means we need to take out this full amount when we're taking it in. So a couple ways you can do that. You can use your tape measure. I just measure from one mark to the other, so 4 1/4 inches. Or you can use your seam gauge and do the same thing, one mark to the other. Either way, we need a total of 4 1/4 inches smaller. A couple ways you can do this. I like to, if it's this much being taken out, that's an awful lot right here for thickness. So I like to actually split that amount and try and put it like half of that amount here, this dart, and half of the amount on the other side where the other dart is. That just kind of spreads the bulk, and you're not having to have such a big chunk of fabric in the center back of the clothes. But when we pin it on the person, just for ease, we just pin it in the center back, and then we go from there. So after we know how much we need to take out, we're actually going to divide that in half. So you can do math, which would be 2 1/8 inches for each side. And then you would divide that in half again, because you're going to actually fold and make a new dart. So each dart total would be 2 1/8. So let's pretend this is the center of my dart here. Let me just mark that. Okay, here's where the center, where that dart is. So if I need to take out exactly 2 1/8 inches on this dart, I'm going to actually, when I fold my fabric into the dart, this is where it's going to be. So that's why I need to divide it in half again, because this dart is my fold line. And then if I stitch right here, that's actually giving me a distance of 2 1/8 inches total. So that's why I'm going to fold it in half and stitch just over 1 inch, 1 1/16 inches. So that's why we're taking this full 4 1/4 inches, dividing it in half. So we have 2 1/8 inch on this side and 2 1/8 inch on this side. And then we will divide it in half again, so that when we stitch, that's the distance from the fold that we're going to be stitching. And then that would be the full amount, 2 1/8 inch, that we would be taking out of each side to equal the 4 1/4. Hopefully that's not more confusing than it needed to be. So I like to find, like I said, that dart. So I just kind of eyeball it. There's my dart right there. I'm going to take out this tag too, because it's going to be in my way again. And honestly, these are kind of itchy when you wear them, especially after you put in some tucks here to make them fit better. So I just remove them all the way. This one is where this pleat is, this dart. I'm going to fold it right there and make this stitch line 1 1/16 inch from this fold. So that's how I mark it. Make that a nice fold there. And I take my grid ruler or some sort of a flat edge, and then we're going to start our ruler where our measurement was, and we're actually going to taper this direction off to this fold here. We're kind of into the pocket, but if I can sort of pin this as if I were stitching it, I can kind of show you what it's going to look like. Let's pretend. Oops. So it's kind of like that. It's going to taper into this dart, and then you wouldn't really see it very much. Looks like I need to slide over just the tiniest bit though with my placement, because I'm not actually tapering into the dart, I'm tapering next to the dart, and I would really like to mask my stitches into that dart right there so that you can't really tell where I was stitching. Just going to roll it just a little bit here. Okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do that on the other half where the other dart is. Here's my line where the dart is, and now I need to go, that's my fold line. And I'm going to do 1 1/16 inches. Make sure that's lined up with the dart real quick. Yes. 1 1/16 inches from this fold right here. So you'll notice my marker on my seam gauge isn't quite at 1 1/16 inch because the thickness of my chalk here is just slightly over, so I allow for that thickness when I mark it. Okay, so then I'm going to use my straight side of my grid ruler here and taper off again like I did with the other one. So together those two pleats that we're making would make the 4 1/4 inch amount that we need to take out. Oops. Now it's easy to think, oh, I'll just stitch a straight line. That'll be fine. I don't need to mark it. But actually it's just more accurate if you mark it first and then stitch it. Okay. Now you want to put your pin right here where this stitching is for the seam. And if you come out the other side right into that stitching, you'll know that your waistband is going to be lined up. When you get it done. So once again, you want to line up on top here. Put your pin perpendicular to the line you drew. That will help so that you didn't shift, and then your waistband will stay lined up. Okay, another thing we need to make sure that we're doing is our needle. This is a pretty thick waistband. This cotton twill is pretty thick. It's almost like denim, not quite as thick, but almost. So I'm going to switch my needle to a jeans needle with a 16 weight for the thickness. So the way we do that is, if you see here, there's a flat side to the needle, and then the rest of it is rounded. So the flat side goes in facing the wall, the back of the machine. And so this screw right here, the needle clamp, you just undo it, lefty loosey, righty tighty, right? And then this will come down, straight down. If it drops all the way down, the worst thing that it will happen is it'll stop in your bobbin and you'll just have to take it out. It's no big deal. It doesn't go lost forever. And then you make sure that you've got the flat side and it's facing the wall, and you just put it back. There's a little spot and you just kind of wiggle it and it'll just stop. You can't put it up too far, but you want to push it up until it stops, and then you just tighten this. You don't really want to crank it really hard because then you over tighten it and then it doesn't do any better. So that's all you do, and then you rethread your needle. If the needle that you took out is not old in any way, you can either, if you remember which package you took it out of, you can put it back in that package. Or I just like to keep a section of needles that I'm pretty sure I know what they are, so, and I know they're still good, so I just keep them. And then when I'm using just general cotton woven fabric, then I just use them because they're pretty standard. It's better to use the wrong needle on a cotton woven fabric than it would be to use the wrong one on like a knit or a spandex. The worst thing that'll happen if you use the wrong needle on heavy fabric is you'll break your needle. So it's not like your project will be ruined. So now if you'll notice, my bobbin thread is not in the top yet. So I'm going to hold my needle thread and I'm going to go one rotation with my hand wheel and pull the bobbin thread to the top and then push them both to the back. And then it's ready to go. One more thing I like to do before we start is kind of hammer my fabric in my waistband just a little bit so that it kind of compacts this thickness and your needle goes through a little bit better. So I've done that and we're going to stitch now. Oops, my pin just broke. So perpendicular to the seam here. You want to make sure that you've got a little bit more underneath your presser foot than less, because you want your feed dogs to have something to grab. Sometimes the thickness might be so much that you have to raise your presser foot a little bit, hyperextension there. And then once you get your presser foot in there, you want to take your pin out because that's just a lot more thickness that you don't want it to deal with. Make sure your needle is in your fabric before you start pushing your foot pedal. And then you're going to actually reverse first. Okay, and then go one step off the back of your fabric. And then you are going to go forward. Get some focus here, okay? Okay, I want to feel here, see if I can get my dart right before I stitch. Because ideally, I'm just stitching right where that dart is, and then it just kind of becomes one with the current dart. You just kind of taper off into that dart. Let's see what we got. I actually think I'm going to take just a little bit of bulk out right here too, into this pocket so that it doesn't sort of bubble as it's being worn. You just have to kind of decide how much needs to be taken out, because not all pants need this much taken out, but sometimes they do. And so you just got to decide where's the most logical place for it to happen so that it's not obvious that you sort of did a shortcut alteration on them. So I'm just going to take this down just a little bit further so that it doesn't bubble out there. I don't want to go too much further down because I don't want to close the pocket. I want it to still be a usable pocket. Okay, let's see if that helped at all. I think we're going to end up having to go over that just a little bit again because you can see my stitches aren't very secure. But I think with some steam and hammer, that won't be near as obvious when they're being worn, especially when that's buttoned closed. So I'm just going to go right over that just one more time, just so that those stitches that sort of looked kind of loose, they were really pretty stretched out. I'm just going to go over this whole thing one more time just for security, because it's kind of a high stress point here, the waist and the hip. I might need to go with my hammer on this part too. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. And we'll hammer that down and press it and steam it really nice. And then when this button is done together, it'll be a little bit poochy, but I don't think my son is going to care. He doesn't wear this color except for his one team uniform. If the person wearing it doesn't want to have that kind of a look on their back pocket though, I would actually probably split this amount into 4 places instead of just 2. So that would be another option you could do. Well, let's go ahead and do this other one here. And now that I know I had to go into the pocket, I'm going to just start going down that far into the pocket. Okay. So I'm going to start just a little bit further in. Needle down, pin out, reverse. I'm going to feel a pocket down here. So this is a really terrible, not straight at all. So I'm definitely going to go back over that, but that's a rough draft. So we can check first before we make it permanent. So look how angled that is. I'm actually probably going to take just a little bit more right here so that it's not such a sharp angle. Okay, we are going to hammer these pants real fast on the waistband. So here's my delightful floor. And I actually prefer to hammer on the concrete floor because it doesn't warp my tabletop or anything and kind of dent my wood. So what you want to do is right here on these thicker parts, you just kind of give them a few taps. You don't need to really put all your force into it or anything. Just kind of let the weight of the hammer put itself down on these thicker intersections here. And you don't want to hit it so hard that you're splitting the fibers of the fabric and kind of undoing the weave in the fibers. Because if you do, you actually will have to mend the fabric. So that's kind of what they look like. It just kind of takes out some of the bulk and it just makes things more cooperative. So I should be able to get that line much straighter when I go back and stitch it now. I think that's okay. And then I'm going to actually hammer that open so that I want to just double check. This one looks much bigger than the other one, so I want to just double check here. I actually think I over stitched right here, so I need to take out some stitches. I'm actually just gonna stitch right here instead, and then I'll take out those stitches that are... Okay. So I will take out these stitches right here real fast, these edge ones. I didn't take them out before I stitched again because it kind of holds them into place and I don't have to put any pins in. So I'm just going to take those out real fast. You could do this seam ripper. Another thing I like to use is I call it a seam ripper, but my students call it a box cutter. You can decide what it is. I really love these because you can just see the cross stitches there and you just kind of run your blade down. And then you take them out that way. And then you just use this part of your scissors, kind of scrape them out, scratch at them a little bit, and then they come loose and you can take them out. So multiple ways. You have to do what's comfortable for you for your seam ripping, because you will be taking out seams. That's just part of sewing. And just like we have an eraser on our pencil, we even have erasable ink on our pens a lot of the time. We have a delete button and a backspace. So same thing. Sometimes we have to undo what we just did, and that's okay. So I'm just gonna trim these tails now. I'm just gonna hammer again here. Okay, so I just hammered these. You can kind of see where my hammer hit. Those will steam out when I use my iron. You have to decide also now which way are your darts going to go. Sometimes it makes sense, like your spine would be right here, of course. Sometimes that back muscle is, pretty thick, and it's having a tuck right here is kind of annoying on that muscle on your back. So then you kind of want to push it maybe toward the spine to kind of fall into that little channel that the spine makes there. This one is a little bit further out though, so I actually am going to avoid those muscles by putting them here, kind of where the back starts to curve around to the front. So then this thickness maybe wouldn't be bothersome to wear, because it sort of follows the curve of the body. So if you're not sure what to do, try them on and see which way, just kind of push them which way feels better. And then you'll know which way to push them. And then I hammered down on these thick points here, because we are now going to top stitch. And what you could do is either stitch in the ditch if you don't want to see the stitching, or I like to stitch right next to my lines here, just up here in the waistband, so it can be covered by a belt. And it just kind of keeps this dart from puffing up as you wash it and it's wet and dried and things, and then it just kind of keeps it laying flat in the way you want it to. So I like to top stitch that down. You just do what you did before. Okay, and then I'm going to steam these open with my iron, so they're almost invisible compared to the rest of the seams and things that are in the pants. I'm just going to go press these and then we're done.